Hello, everybody, from wherever you are in the world, or from Fuqua to wherever you are in the world. It gives me extreme pleasure to welcome you to the Fuqua School of Business Distinguished Speaker Series, and it's an especially wonderful opportunity tonight to have Kareem Cook join with us for this event. And so Kareem is just a wonderful human being. I should start there. But he is someone who has done everything that we've ever asked from the point of view of the business school and from Duke University. He is a double Dookie and has distinguished himself in so many different ways. And so I look forward to a conversation with Kareem as we talk about his interesting journey and lessons learned to share with all of you. So Kareem, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I feel honored and distinguished to be selected amongst all the alumni that you could have chosen. I really do feel honored to be here. So thank you for choosing me.
So Kareem, of course, you truly are distinguished, and I have to believe that this is one of those interesting moments in life of kind of full circle. When you were a Fuqua student, you were actually an executive fellow and would steward around the distinguished speakers. So how does it feel to end up in this role?
That point and that experience is not lost on me. I look at that experience and one particular moment during that time is something that has impacted my life exponentially since that moment. And that was meeting Alan Schwartz, who at the time was the CEO of Bear Stearns and chairman of the Board of Visitors. And I actually happened to be assigned to meet him and pick him up at the airport. And on that 30-minute ride back, he asked me, how does a guy from the Bronx, New York end up at Duke twice? And I said, well, I was in a program called Prepper Prep in 5th grade that sort of identifies talented minority youth. And you go through a program to get a scholarship to the elite private schools in New York. I went to Calhoun. And I said, I was in that program back in 1983. And he said, I can't believe it. You're like, I've invested in that program. You're like the manifestation of my investment. And immediately we forged a friendship, and at the end of that 30-minute ride, he invited me over to his house for Thanksgiving. And I initially said yes until I thought about the thought of, my 10 family members coming to his house and leaving with the food and his wife not understanding our culture. And so I went there the Friday after, but we've been friends ever since, and he's invested with us and is about to invest again in a round we're doing.
So you have a fascinating life story, and you've tipped us off to some of it, which is how you first came to Duke from the Bronx. Before we get into your business accomplishments and some of the things you're working on right now, let's talk about the road not taken. And one of the things that I was just really surprised to learn, especially because I didn't know this about Duke, is that apparently Duke is one of the premium universities for stepping. And so you clearly came to Duke for that reason. But this is actually, you're like an all-star stepper from New York. And more than that, tell us about this road not taken as a choreographer.
That's hysterical. So, I think most people are familiar with the fact that historically Black fraternities compete in a dance form called stepping, which is a cappella stepping. And my chapter in particular, I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. And when I got to Duke and I joined the fraternity, we were really good at stepping. We would win all the shows at Duke, although people might disagree with that. But we did. And then we would go all over North Carolina and we compete and we win, and we built up a name for ourselves. And I think what you're referring to is one day I got a random call from Debbie Allen, who is still the premier choreographer in the country. And she'd heard that from her brother, who's actually a Fuqua grad, and his name is Hugh Allen. And he had told her that I was the best stepper he'd ever seen. And she just randomly called me and asked me about coming to New York and show her some things. And I was floored, but I said, yeah. I came up there the next day, and she put me on the stage and said, let's see what you could do. And I just did what I did. And she said, you got to show Michael when he comes in, because that's amazing. I said, who's Michael? She's like, Michael Jackson. This is for Michael Jackson. I didn't tell you. And I was like, no, you didn't tell me. So a couple hours later, he comes in, and I do the same thing for him. And he's like, man, that's like Gene Kelly. That's, he's seemingly amazed. And he says, look, man, I want you to choreograph a routine to my song Bad, using that stuff you're doing for this concert I'm doing. Can you do that? Can you come up here for 3 months? And I said, sure. I came back the next day, and I was there for 3 months and worked with Michael Jackson. And that was in 95. And in 2001, he called me again to fly out to LA. And this time he called my mother pretending to be a woman. And I did that. And Debbie Allen and I stayed in contact too. We ended up writing the business plan for the Debbie Allen Dance Academy, and actually started my first business out of the Dance Academy because of that. So you could say that, everything I am now started with, choreographing for Michael Jackson.
So any regrets that you could have chosen this career, since the kind of leading choreographer in the country thought you were the leading light in this space? Clearly you had a future in front of you. What made you decide not to go down that path?
I just didn't. It was fun, and I thought I could figure out a way to kind of utilize left brain, right brain, my desire to be creative, and as well as be a business person. And when we wrote the business plan for the Debbie Allen Dance Academy, I'll just go forward with that. When we came out to LA, we had written this plan 2 years before, and we came out to LA in 2002. My business partner's name's Claude Tellis, by the way. He went to Duke as well and Wharton for Business School. Not as smart as me, but anyway. So we come out there, and she goes, I never paid you for this business plan, but I have this dance academy that's beautiful. And it's because, you guys helped get this thing started. And by the way, it was invested in by Eddie Murphy, Denzel Washington, William Morris Agency, Berry Gordy, and a few other LA celebrities. And she said, you guys can have the whole back area for your business. And that's where we incubated our first, literally, we were in business a month later because we already had a space, computers, phone lines, and we just jumped in and started fighting from the moment we landed here. But I never quite gave up that part of it, because the great thing about being at the Debbie Allen Dance Academy is that the best dancers from every field of dancing taught there. And I ended up taking salsa and ended up being on a professional salsa team and competing along with one of the teachers at the Dance Academy. So
always something new here. So one more question about dance before we turn to other subjects. So I do know that for one of your big reunions that you had choreographed a stepping number, and then you got hurt, and Grant Hill was going to be up on stage with you, and I've never seen him so relieved when you got hurt and this wasn't going to happen. So can Grant step, or is that something where he can play basketball, but this was really a bridge too far for him?
Grant can dance, and what that was going to be was we were going to do a concert, a reunion for our undergrad at Duke for the reunion, and we were going to have Belle Biv DeVoe, I think, come and perform, and we were going to do the routine with them. So thankfully that didn't happen, because I don't think there's any way possible that I could have been good enough to even make that look good. I mean, but Grant's a pretty good dancer. So I guess I'll just stick to the point of your question. He is. And you can go to his Instagram page and you can find out he's pretty good.
Okay. So what brought you back to Duke and the decision to come back to business school at Fuqua?
Well, here's a story that not many people know. I actually applied to Fuqua 2 years after graduating, and I actually got in. And I ended up deferring for 2 years because I felt like I needed to get some more business experience. But the plan was always to come back to Fuqua if I was good enough and qualified enough to be admitted. And so it was just a place I wanted to be. I spent a lot of time in undergrad, you know, going over to the business school. One of my mentors, and I consider a big brother, is Mark Williams, who's Fuqua 96. And he's been a heavy influence in my life. And you know, he helped me to even consider being in business the way that I am. And so I just had all these healthy influences at Fuqua. Grant Hill's mom, Janet Hill, is my biggest personal mentor. And she was on the board of visitors at the time. And she always talked about going back to Fuqua, and she was letting me know everything that she could without, you know, breaking any rules. And I was like, man, this is such a great place. And I knew that, you know, I knew that I could see where Fuqua was going, you know, and I could see that it was already a top school, but it was going to be #1 at some point, and I wanted to be a part of it. So that's why I chose Fuqua. It was the Team Fuqua philosophy too that really, you know, I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I was drunk on it before I even, you know, applied. Just walking through the halls of Fuqua and seeing everyone talk about it and all my friends who were there. So yeah, so it was just something I knew I was going to do.
So you had an interesting Team Fuqua experience at the very beginning of the program.
Yeah.
During orientation, and the word I would use to describe how you responded is courage. Mm-hmm. And so you made your mark on your classmates from the very beginning in a way that lasted with them throughout their time. So tell me about what happened.
Okay. I think I'm surprised I think you may be talking about, I believe it was ILE. Is that the program? Yeah, I think that's what you're talking about. So I was, you know, that's I guess it's a week-long program with your team. They assign you a team that's pretty diverse. And then you do this ILE program and team building. And the first 3 or 4 days is just team building with your individual team, the 7 people that you're with. And then you guys become a team. And then they match you with another team, and you're sort of competing with that team and strengthening your bond. But then you end up in order to succeed, you have to partner with this team. So now you learn how to use your team to partner with another team actually to have the optimal goals. And then at the end, you merge with every team. And so I think there were about 330 students now. I know there's a lot more Fuqua students, but all 330 of you are now faced with an obstacle that you have to get together and defeat, right? And so that's the whole point of it becomes clear as you're going along what the point is. And there's a wall, and they might still do it. It's maybe a 10-foot wall or 12-foot wall, but the whole class has to get over, right? And whether a student is in a wheelchair or you know, they have some sort of handicap, debilitating handicap or whatever, all of you have to get over this wall. And so at the top of the wall is the antagonist who's telling you you can't get over the wall, even though there's 330 of you. And ours was a white woman who had on an afro wig and some sunglasses and speaking in slang, and she was calling herself the Wall Sister. And she was like, some made up rap about how y'all can't get over this wall. Y'all know what it, you know, she was real extra with it. And I remember looking up and being shocked. And I looked around and all the Black students were all looking at each other, making eye contact. And there was another student named Carter Kirsch who was also looking up, but he was looking for me to make eye contact with him. We made eye contact. And then we all got over the wall. But then we had a sort of a school meeting in the auditorium to talk about the benefits of the program. And we had every team had one representative, and I raised my hand and I said, listen, you know, I really enjoyed it and I understood the purpose of the program and I thought you accomplished that. But I will say that it was disheartening how it ended. You know, I think that the biggest lesson we learned is that there needs to be sensitivity training amongst those who are trying to influence us and make us better. And I was very offended by the Wall Sister. And she was on stage and she turned bright red and her whole team was there and they immediately were trying to defend, oh, no, she helps kids in Durham. And I said, you know, that's fine. You know, I know she does this routine with 7-year-olds, but I'm an adult, so I know what's offensive. And of course, a 7-year-old doesn't. And then all the other students in the auditorium were saying, I was offended too, and I'm glad you spoke up. And I had to go on stage, and Rex Adams, who was the dean of the school then, was, you know, I had to go see him. And I ended up having to go and consult this group. But the beautiful thing that happened was it became a conversation within our class from the moment we got there. And it was a conversation that incident allowed to happen. And no one had to feel as though, because people admitted, well, I don't see what's offensive about that. And so, okay, well, let me explain to you why that's offensive. And so it was this conversation that kind of jump-started me in that, my persona in the class. And at the graduation, Carter was our class speaker, and he mentioned that moment, and he mentioned those things I said, and I was honored that he did that. Now that I realized it was a moment for all of us, but I didn't realize how much it impacted in the way it did. So, yeah, so I stepped on the scene and shook things up.
Good for you. Good for you. So, let's move past, since we've heard the graduation speech. Let's move to what happens next. So, you chose kind of a road less traveled in terms of wanting to be an entrepreneur. So, what was it that led you in that direction rather than taking a more traditional employment path?
Yeah. So, I'll tell you the reason. It's not an impressive reason, but it's apropos because Grant often calls me the Black Forrest Gump, given some of my experiences. And I'll say this because when Forrest Gump stops running on that trail and everybody's looking for some deep understand, why did you do this? And he goes, why? He said, I don't know. I'm tired. And that was it. There was nothing deep about it. And so this is going to be on that level. I did an internship at Disney in between the first and second year. And they gave us a book called The Disney Look. And they had pictures of what you could look like and pictures of what you couldn't look like. And so on half of the book what you couldn't look like was basically a picture of me. Was a person with a basically bald head, with a goatee, there's no facial hair. And they just started allowing people to have bald heads. That was thanks to a Black vice president named Reggie Williams there. And so I was like, what do they mean? I'm a grown man. I can't look this way. So I was so offended by it that when I started working at Disney, I tried to fight the system. Like, I would shave every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday, I would get up and not shave. And Friday, I wouldn't shave. And Saturday, and Friday night, I would get home and I would shape up my little goatee. And I'd be like, man, I hate this. And then Saturday would almost be right. And the Sunday would be perfect. And then Monday, I'd have to cut it off again. And then one Thursday, my boss came in and said, I see what you're doing, man. You can't do that. And I was just so offended. I said, I don't know if I could ever work with somebody if this is what it means. Like, people have this much control over my life. And so when I went back second year, I refocused onto the entrepreneurship path from the marketing path I was on. And really, it was as silly as that sounds. It was the straw that broke the camel's back. And so I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I knew I wanted to write the rules and live by my own code and use that code to navigate the world and win there. So that was it. I was tired.
So as you chose this path where you got to make your own rules, you actually changed some rules in terms of how people consume snacks and so on.
Yep.
But what was it that motivated you to choose what has become a kind of a consistent theme in your entrepreneurial activities around either healthy food or health supplements? So kind of position yourself in the health space.
So it's 2020 has uncovered that reason for the rest of the country, but the underbelly of the country, or not so dirty secret, is that health disparities between the African-American community and the general population are so far apart. And my business partner and I, in undergrad, we used to talk about, we both have 8 aunts and uncles. At the time, a few of them had diabetes, but all of our grandparents and their siblings had diabetes, and how common it was for Black folks, particularly in the South, but really in general, to open a refrigerator and see insulin there. And, everyone has diabetes, and you just sort of accept the fact that at some point you're going to die of diabetes or heart disease or hypertension, something that's diet related and avoidable. But the culture dictates that you believe that it's not avoidable. So you think that you think it's unavoidable. So you do what you want, you eat what you want, and you just live your life and love your life. And then at some point it's going to happen. And I was like, well, that's not how I want to live thinking. I don't think my destiny is pre-written. And so he and I had these conversations back then. And so when we graduated from business school, we had the opportunity when we came out to LA, and we didn't quite know what we were going to do. We were working on something, but we quickly pivoted when we got to LA and we saw all these unhealthy kids. Like, we were like, wait a minute, LA on TV is like Baywatch. Where's all the people in this unbelievable shape? And some areas of California, the beaches, Hollywood, yeah, where it's superficial, but the majority of LA is not what you see on TV. It's just regular people living regular lives. And it was a 40% child obesity rate. And we just looked at each other and we said, we have an office. Why don't we start that business? What if we put healthy vending machines in the schools? And that was really the impetus. So that was how I got interested in health and wellness. And I will just say that, in COVID, I had an aunt and a cousin pass from COVID, and it was due to their underlying diabetes that made it happen. So the rest of the world is now seeing what we saw a long time ago, which is why everyone is now asking us more about what we're doing. Okay, now I see what you guys have been doing and why you've been doing it. So that's why we headed down this path, because family, and eventually we saw an opportunity to do something about it.
Yeah. So as you went down this path, you, as any entrepreneur does, you have to raise money, and you learned kind of early on a really important thing about being an entrepreneur, which is the role of confidence. So can you tell us who? Well, I'll tell people that it was John Mack who gave you this lesson, and John Mack, of course, is the former CEO of Morgan Stanley,
Yeah.
and a part of this Duke network. But how did he really drive this home for you?
Well, since you revealed the name of this individual, now I'm gonna have to give you the G version. But let's just say that John Mack has been a CEO of Morgan Stanley, and he's on the board of the Chinese government, financial arm of the Chinese government. It's escaping me now. But anyway, he's a major person in finance. He's always written about in the Wall Street Journal, and they call him Mac the Knife, jokingly or not jokingly. So there's the background, and he's a guy that we went to raise some money with when we first started raising the search fund. And he was the first one to say, you know what? I'm impressed by your vending machine company, that all the everything that you've accomplished there. Now, I don't invest in companies, I invest in people. And so he said, I'll invest, I'll write that first check, but you prove to me you can raise the rest of the money you're trying to raise and come back and I'll write the check. So we go away, and it takes us about 8 months. We come back and we say to him, hey, we got the commitments, we're ready for that first check. And so he goes, well, you have anything I can read? Any PPMs or anything? I said, yeah, we have this. We give him a 30-page document, and he thumbs through it, but he quickly gets to the page where we're gonna make just a measly 100,000. We're gonna make 100,000 a year. And he goes, wait a minute, I'm gonna pay you guys 100,000? I'm gonna pay you guys 100, and he's like, he just turns to Mac the Knife on us, right? And so I won't say what he said, but it was pretty intimidating. And so, I'm like, these are fighting words. I mean, this is, somebody says this to you in the Bronx, man. It's followed up by knives and guns. And so I'm scared, admittedly, and I say to myself, well, maybe I'll just say, we'll take 65,000. But I said, let me let my business partner, Claude, speak first. So Claude just looks at it and he goes, both of us, Kareem got his degree from Duke undergrad. I got my degree. You went to Duke undergrad as well. I went to Wharton. He went back to Duke for business school. Right now, I could go on the street and make 300 to 400,000 a year. For 100,000, you get me at a discount, and I'm not taking any less. And he just looked at him, and they looked at each other, and I just kind of looked at them both. And then John just looked at us, and he goes, all right, what's next? What else you got? And so you know, we finished, and he wired, you know, made plans for a wire, and he was the first investor. But we ended up we have this tradition when a meeting goes that well, we don't say anything to each other. We just put on our coats and walk to sit in the elevator area. We go in the elevator. We don't even trust the cameras in the elevator. We get outside the building, and then we do whatever we have to do. Like, thank you, Lord Jesus, thank you. You know, whatever it's going to be. And that time it was, that's how you drive, Claude. That's how you drive. And so anyway, but it was funny because in that moment, it wasn't long after when we realized the whole point of that exercise. It was, you know, here we're asking for a couple 100,000 right now. But at some point, you're going to be back for 7-figure checks, and you're going to be representing my interests and my money in meetings with some real, you know, with some lions. And I need to know that the people stewarding my money are not going to be intimidated by some blowhard just yelling at you. And so it made sense to us, and that's what that was all about. And it was a valuable lesson to me in that have confidence in who you are, know your worth, know your know your value, and never ever compromise that your values and what you are and who you are. And so it was a valuable lesson that we laugh about now. And I mentioned it to him one time. I said, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to mention that. He's like, don't ever try and make me look bad in that book. I was like, all right, I'll just take 65.
So you, as an entrepreneur, you were a founder and founded Tower View Capital Management, which really actually switched your path from being the founder of additional companies to being an owner of companies. And so what I want to focus on is the NatureAid story, where you are an owner. You also act as the CMO, but you're kind of reporting to yourself as owner here.
Right.
And so my first question is, what did you discover is different in terms of the skills, the kind of leadership capability you need as an owner as opposed to a founder?
Gotcha. So there are some similar skills, but it was a different path. If I just compare my two journeys, and so we didn't speak much about it, but the Healthy Vending Machine Company, as you mentioned, we founded it, came up with the idea, and we did some great things. And you know, we basically, within 2 years, we got the law changed in LA, eventually California, banning junk food in schools, and we got the contract for every single public high school, middle school in LA. So that's what we did there. And it was the two of us, although we ended up hiring drivers and that kind of thing. The owner part was buying an existing company that already had an existing culture, an existing set of employees that we didn't hire. And they had a corporate culture that we may or may not agree with once we get there. And so there's change management that happens when you acquire a company, when you buy a company, as opposed to starting a company, because everyone you hire, they just have to follow, and so we were faced with some challenges, to be quite honest, when we bought the company, because it's a company that's been around. So NatureAid is a company that's been around since 1926. It had existed in a variety of iterations and looks. It's gone from selling products to being a natural food store chain nationwide, sort of like Whole Foods, and it sold all types of products. And many of the employees that we bought the company had been there 10, 15 years. It wasn't very diverse. Mostly, it was all management was white males, and there's conservative values. I'll just say that. And so when we two brothers show up and buy the company, I mean, there's movies made about stuff like this in terms of the comedy that happens, right? It's like Eddie Murphy walking into that cowboy saloon with Nick Nolte in 48 Hours. I'm the new sheriff, and that was pretty much how it felt, and to everyone, us and them, right? And so a couple things we had to do. One, we had to make everyone feel safe, right? And so we had to come in and say, look, your job's not at jeopardy. We bought the company because we like, the company. We like you, But two, we need you to buy into this new vision and this new culture. We are going to be a very diverse company. We're going to embrace diversity. We are going to do things in the world. Our company is not going to just exist to make money. Like, we're trying to help people. And so the first thing we did, was we were like, well, look, our first employees are going to be in the C-suite, and the management team is going to be 2 women, because there are none here. And 80% of our products are purchased by women. Doesn't make any sense. And so that was a battle, within the culture of this guy. So we ended up having to come in there, and really, I guess the short answer is the change management is required when you acquire a company versus found a company. And you have to do it delicately, or else the whole company could implode, right? And it actually did. So the CFO was like, all right, I'm out. So he just bounced on us, and the CEO bounced too. And we were like, all right, we'll just slide on in and we'll run the company, because obviously, we had to learn this on the fly, but this is what it takes in order to really accomplish what we want to accomplish. We have to run it. And so we did that. And so I would say that change management skills.
So right now, you're in a really strong position, but it's probably fair to say that with as can happen as you're growing any business, you go through moments that are very, very tense. Without putting you on the spot in terms of particular retailers and so on, where you're trying to get distribution, you said something interesting to me, which is the question of should you get a designation as a Black-owned enterprise? And your kind of initial reaction was, what good does that do? And in fact, can you tell us a little bit about how that's made life complicated for you?
Yeah, well, I'll say this. It's been a learning process for me. And so one of the things that I've always been is just, anyone who knows me will say, hey man, Kareem, you don't have much of a filter. You don't have to wonder what's on his mind, because he just sort of says it and kind of lives with the consequences. And but I was in the beginning, we were intentional to not do that. And so when we first bought the company, we didn't designate it as an MBE certified company, minority business enterprise. And we ended up hiring, when the CEO left, we hired a president who had experience in the natural channel. And he was, and I'll just describe him, because we really try not to bring politics into the company. As long as you can buy into what we're doing, we don't really care about all that. But he was sort of a conservative white guy from just straight, brought up in the suburbs and white neighborhood, didn't really understand what we were doing, but he was good at selling. And so his thing was, and a lot of white people believe this, that we need to go ahead and get this MBE. Because it'll help us, because for some reason, a lot of white folks believe that if you're Black in this country, it's easier for you. So I told him, I said, listen, I have to be honest with you, man. I don't know if we're going to do that, because I know you believe differently, but being Black has never helped me, or in anything I've wanted to do. And I had to tell him, I said, on some level, and I know that, we're not monolithic as a race, by no means. And I know that a lot of Black people would disagree with this, but I think more agree with this, at least the ones I know, that we're always aware of our Blackness. We are always aware that we are a Black, if we were the only ones in the room, we're aware that we're the only Black person in the room. And we are aware that because of our color, because of how we were born, and you can't change that, that some people are just not going to accept you. And that's not good. They're going to prejudge you in some way. And so, and I even told him this. I said, look, I'll be honest with you. I hate them telling you this, but when I go to Starbucks and they ask me my name, I don't say Kareem. I say KC. They put KC on the cup, or they might spell it CASEY, whatever. And he's like, why do you do that? And I said, because if they see the name Kareem, they know I'm Black before I even see what that person is, and they might do something because of that. And that's the reality we live in. And so that was how we looked at the being an MBA. And finally we said to ourselves, after 2 years, we were like, you know what? This goes against who we are. We need to be intentional. We need to be bold in who we are. And it's time for the world to know who we are and what we're doing. And so we ended up getting the MBE. And he was happy about that. But guess what happened after that? We ended up being deleted from a major retailer that was about 30% of our business. And come to find out from our president that buyer and he were having conversations, and this guy was like, yo, I'm not really here for affirmative action companies. And it was like, well, did you tell him that the company had been in this retail chain for 8 years before we acquired the company? He's like, yeah, but he thinks it's and I said, did you tell him that we were up 80% year over year in the fourth quarter, and we're up 34% right now? Yeah, but they just discontinued us. And we complained. And of course, our guy didn't want to stand behind what he had shared with us, because he has a reputation and he is go forward. He wants to be hired places. He wants to stay in that good old boy network. And we reached out to Supply Diversity, and they looked into it. And this guy was, he was upset about it, and sent us an email saying, hey, Supply Diversity reached out to me. They told us, that you approached them, and I just want you to be aware of what this might mean for your future at our company, and NatureAid's and what it means for the possibility of NatureAid coming back into our stores. So it was basically a veiled threat. You complain, you'll never be here again. And so we just had to take it like that. And it was hard because it actually put us in a little bit of a spiral and affected us in a major way. And had we not been who we are and do what we do, the company might not be around. Now we rebounded from there. We ended up, we had a choice. Do we try to litigate this company? Do we bring it to national attention because we have the means to do that? Or do we just go on to the next? So we ended up just going on, and happy to say that we got into Costco, which, the philosophy there is totally different. And so, it's like being rejected by Bronx Community College and then getting into Harvard. How would compare the two, although they both think they're Harvard. One's Bronx Community College. But anyway, and so yeah, so that's it's real. It's a real thing, and so I think that's the other thing that's happening in 2020. 2020 is sort of the best of times and the worst of times, right? Because we're being hit by COVID, which is devastating the nation and the world. But we're getting to see playing right before our eyes. I think the white folks who are just good but just haven't been able to see this, are now being able to turn on their TV and see what we've been talking about and why people have been angry for so long, why their Black friends are always complaining about something, and I think that everyone's getting to see it. Not everybody agrees that what they're looking at is the same thing, but now everyone's going to see it. Everyone's seeing, a policeman, step on somebody's neck for 8 minutes, 46 seconds. Like, we all saw that. And so the world is changing now. We got to go on, we were on Fox because they wanted to know about how difficult it is as a Black-owned company to get into retail and get retail distribution. And we were like, it's difficult. These are the stories. I could sit here for hours and tell you some of the fights we've had. We got a call from Target the next day, and they have an amazing supply diversity group there. Shout out to Target. And they were like, hey, we're interested. We don't believe any of that. And we had a conversation with them, and within a couple of weeks, they gave us distribution to 550 stores we just shipped. We're on Target.com now, and we'll be in the stores in a few weeks. And so, it's making people take a stand. You no longer can say, I don't know this is happening, or ignore it, or, you have to take what side of the line are you on? And there are retailers that are saying, we're firmly on this side of the line. And I think that's a good thing. So when I say the good and the bad, that's the good thing.
So one of the challenges that I've heard you talk about is that can be really tough on a growing business is the requirement that you not be more than 20% of your sales in say a certain retail channel. And of course, the policy is presumably with a good intention in terms of not making you hold too much risk with their business, but there's an unintended consequence, which is what?
Right. So, I'll give you an example of that. There are a few companies that have that mandate, but we ended up meeting with one of the biggest ones, and we ended up getting a meeting with the CEO, the CFO, and Magic Johnson's our newest partner and investor in Grant Hills recently as well. So we ended up having a meeting with that CEO, that CFO, and Magic and Grant came along with us, and Claude was there too. And we were originally given .com business, and it's impressive, but a lot of companies get invited into .com for a lot of companies, because a lot of people don't shop on .com outside of Amazon. They don't really go to these retail stores and do it. So they'll take what they can. They'll just try to compete with Amazon on some level. The real holy grail is really getting into these stores on the shelves. And so we met with the CEO, and I said, and he was telling us, one of the biggest initiatives with our company is we want more diversity in the C-suite, and we want more diversities in the vendors. And I said to him, and I had to think long and hard about it because we're thankful for .com business. I said, you know what? I have to be honest with you, man. I said, if that is your top goal, then I just need you to know that you're also your biggest impediment, and what you practice unintentionally is systemic, what we call systemic or institutional racism, because you have this mandate that you don't want to be more than 20% of a company's sales. Well, the two companies we compete with in your store are each doing 50, 60 million in sales. How many Black-owned companies do you know are doing 250 million or 300 million in top line revenue? And I'll tell you, there's zero in this space. In the majority of the areas that you offer through your store, there is zero. You will never have a Black-owned company, minority-owned company. You'd be hard-pressed to find a woman-owned company, even a white woman-owned company that fits this mandate. And so you are your biggest impediment. And it was sort of like this clouds open up for him. I mean, he's a great person, but he didn't see this. And so he said, man, I never really thought about that. He said, how about we give you guys, 5 stores and let's see how it goes. And then, that turned into 40 stores. And he said, you know what? This conversation has been so impactful for me that what we're going to do is we're not even going to make any money off of your product. We're going to take all the profits and donate to inner city education, inner city schooling, because that's what I'm passionate about as a person on this planet. And it was just a great meeting. And what it really was, if you just step back and and look what happened is, a lot of the times we as minority entrepreneurs and business owners or just anyone that's given an opportunity, in sales, they say, you just want to be inside the house. The goal is to be inside the house when the door closes, right? And that's that's probably from back in the day when people were selling vacuum cleaners, but lasts to this day. And that's actually not the goal. The goal is, to be inside the house when the door closes, but the goal is to make sure the door is not closed all the way. And also to do so well of a job that now others like you are in demand and people want more of you. Where can I find another one of you? And that's just on a macro level, just not even breaking it down to race, but to this individual example, our goal was, look, we're in here, but guess what? We're the best. We're the best of there are 3, top #1 school degrees in here sitting in your room. Black guys with degrees from Duke and Wharton and, did all this in the world. You'd be hard pressed to find, anyone better qualified. We just get on our qualifications, we deserve to be here. And so we have to fight like this to get in, and we're overly qualified. Then imagine the other people that's behind us. And so it's our job that we're in the house now to open that door. And that's what we did. And this CEO is like, you know what? This conversation has been so impactful to me. Now I'm looking at ways that our company can, do you know any Black banks that we can put our money with? Do you know any other Black-owned vendors that we could talk to? that you think are qualified to be here that could do well here. And so it was a great conversation, and it ended well for us, but it also opened the door for other people. And I think that's the goal. Too many times you get in there and you try to, like I think I was telling you, there's a Lovecraft Country. There's a scene in there where there's a black girl, the first black person hired by the supermarket, the department store represented in the story, and she's like, I have to, fight to be the one that's here. I have to fight to be the one that gets here and fight to stay here. And no, it's not. You don't have to fight to stay there. You do have to fight to stay there, but your fight also should be that to fight to not be the only one there. Like open the door, and so that's how we kind of see it, and that's how we're going in this environment. And it's the right environment, it's the right time to do it.
So the story you just told about the company where the CEO said, "Hey, have you got other Black-owned businesses that are qualified where we could do business with them?" And an important word there was qualified, but you've also had experiences where someone has told you, "Yeah, we'll give you placement, and I don't need to know anything about your product. I know you're Black."
Yeah.
And without really getting into, is this a quality product? Are people going to want it? So how do you react to something like that when someone presumably has good intentions, but has done something which does not feel right to you?
Yeah. So on some level, you have to ask yourself in most situations, does the ends justify the means, right? Does the fact that you got what you want justify what you had to endure getting there, right? And so I think you're talking about another retail chain that we recently got distribution in. And, we walked through the whole presentation, why our product is better, why it tastes better. Here are the reviews on Amazon. We beat everyone in your store on your shelves, on Amazon. And we go through the whole hour. At the end, she sort of, this person sort of, blah about it. It's like, all right, yeah, I'll give you guys distribution. She's like, look, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it's, big part of the reason here is because you're Black. And it was like, what? And, it's like, what? And I get that, if you say, and the nuance is you're Black, right? Not because you're Black and you're qualified and you're the top company in your space. And we've looked at the data and we see that everywhere that you compete with these products, all these things are available there, by the way. Everywhere you compete with these products, you beat them head to head on the shelves. Not that, just you're Black, right? And it was a moment where, do you blow up the ship right now just to make this point, or do you take what's given to you, do so well that regardless of this individual's opinion afterwards, she's in no position to mess up your destiny. And then you go into her office and teach her this lesson. And so that's sort of what we decided to do. I mean, this is not the end of it. That was the first conversation. There's going to be a subsequent conversation. And, I think just part of human communication, period, on all levels, is how your words made me feel. Was that your intention? If that's not your intention, don't say those words again. Try to figure out how to find the words to better describe, the way you feel. I have a dictionary and a glossary for you if you need it. But thesaurus. Encyclopedias my grandmother gave me a long time ago. Anyway, but yeah, just come up with some other ways to, that was a punch in the face after winning. You know what I mean? Like winning and then getting punched, crossing the finish line, and then the person at the end of the goal punches you in the face.
Yeah, so that didn't lead to one of your celebrations as you got outside, presumably.
By the way, I'm always product placing, brands that I support.
So, given that you're bringing that brand into play here, your feelings on the kind of the lifetime value of your connection to Duke and to the Fuqua School.
Yeah. So It's funny. I say that the best decision, and I guess you could call it two decisions since I applied and got in and went twice. But I say the best decision I ever made in life was really coming to Duke or joining the Duke brand. And because it has been invaluable. I mean, I can't really explain how valuable going to Duke and particularly going to Fuqua has been for me on a whole lot of levels, from personal, business. You know, just this morning, just this morning, I got a text from I graduated in 2000, and a guy named Hume Merritt graduated in 2001. He just sent me an article that he found that we were written up that we were written about on, but we were written in that article because he also suggested to someone that they feature us for Prime Day. Today's Amazon Prime Day. So go search Nature Aid and buy a product. Prime Day, you get some sales. Anyway, that's how you spell it. And
Always working.
Right. But, you know, the relationships I've built, you know, and that Team Fuqua philosophy, right? I mean, here's a guy that he just called me out. He's a friend of mine, but we don't always talk. There'll be months that go by without us talking, and he just thinks about me. He has a company, he runs a company himself, you know, but he'll just think about me. And he's like, hey, here's a huge opportunity. You know, I wonder if Kareem knows about it. Let me hit him up. You know, or I have classmates, you know, a woman named Ann Sapowski is like the smartest marketer I know. And I think she's Gemba, but can't tell you the class. She's my class undergrad at Show Smith at Fuqua. And whenever I'm approaching a marketing situation, she's the first person I call. And she'll stop what she's doing, and, you know, and she'll give her critique, and she'll even, you know, put in the work. And I have so many stories like that, you know, and even in my investors, my biggest investor was a guy that we cold. He's a billionaire out here in LA. Was a guy that we cold called. I mean, he didn't know me from Adam. You know, we just said you know, my business partner, I went to Duke. We're doing this. We'd love to get 15 minutes of your time. And we met with him. And a year later, he's written a, you know, 7-figure check to the company. And so, you know, I just think that the Duke brand, the networking, that's just one thing. Of course, the education is superior and top quality. And I just think that, and I think I've shared this with you. I think that the biggest waste of time is the person who graduates and doesn't reconnect with the Duke brand. And for me, it was really the Fuqua brand first, even though I went to Duke undergrad, obviously first. Fuqua stayed in such close contact with me after I graduated. And I went back every year for the minority workshop. And I think maybe Owen May has gone back more times than me, only because he graduated 20 years before. You know, graduated sometime, it wasn't that long, but he's, you know, but at one point I had gone back 18 consecutive times. All right. And so, and I'll never forget, I went back one time, and at the time Liz Riley was the admissions director. And every year I'm always sending her some people. I'm like, hey, you should look at this guy, blah, blah, blah. And most of the time she'll look at them, and at least half the time they get admitted. And so every year, seemingly one person would get in, and I went back and I ended up getting an award. And I was so shocked, because it was one of those awards you don't know you're going to get, and no one tells you you're going to get it. And called me up there in front of everyone at Janine Auditorium. And for a person who has so many words, I didn't have any words. She's like, you want to say anything? I was like, no, I was so humbled. And she said, you know, I'm not hooking your friends up or people you know up, you know, and she said that, I'm not hooking these people up. Kareem is introduced us to, you know, at this point, 8 or 9 people that have become Fuqua alum who, you know, who remain a part of the Fuqua community. And when I look at you, I see you as someone who finds people who should be here that we somehow couldn't find. And so I looked at it another way. I was like, man, this is a great person. I hope, you know, Fuqua will let this person in. And they're like, I didn't realize on the other side of it, she was appreciating me for that. And so that's just an example. And so, you know, Fuqua's always supported my my ambitions, my endeavors, there are professors I still talk to, and I always go back. I go to Fuqua at least twice a year. Now that I'm on a DAA board, I'm there all the time. But I think that the first thing you should do really when you graduate from Duke for Fuqua is to actually find the alumni club in your area. That should be the first thing you do, is plug back in. Don't allow yourself to be cut off or cut yourself off, because it's such an invaluable resource. I mean, just I can't even really give it justice on how it's helped me.
So I'm gonna give you a chance to give some last advice, but I have to admit that I looked at your IMDb page, and not only do you have that credit there for choreographer for Michael Jackson, but also apparently Wheel of Fortune. Not choreography, but as a contestant. And somehow you knew that you were destined to be on Wheel of Fortune. How did that come to pass?
Oh man, I can't believe this is. So it's funny. This is weird. So as a kid, I knew two things. I always knew that I was going to meet Michael Jackson, and I always knew that I was going to be on Wheel of Fortune, because just I love Michael Jackson's music, and I watch Wheel of Fortune all the time. And so it's funny. I have a friend who's a big time celebrity, a guy named Michael Ealy, and I remember when he got one of his first big roles. He had, it was in LA, and he was having a premiere. The eyes were watching God, and he was like, "Hey man," invited me to the premiere. And at the same time, I got some random solicitation, some email on my Yahoo account. That's how long ago it was. And the Wheel of Fortune Wheelo wagon is coming in town, and so I just applied quickly, and I got accepted. So I had to choose between this premiere, right? It's Hollywood premiere with all these A-list celebrities, and drive 2 hours to Palm Springs to be on what turned out to be the longest line. Like the Pearly Gates line is not this long. It was 1,000 people that went through the casino and through a parking lot, and I got there, got on that line, and I waited, and I did it, and I applied. They called me, and I went on there, and it was funny. I won 4,800, but it was funny because when I looked at that show, I people say that the SAT and these tests are culturally biased, right? And that's how I felt about losing Wheel of Fortune, because I had like up to maybe 15,000. It was some huge number, and the puzzle was award-winning barbecue sauce. And I was like, man, I couldn't figure out what it was. I had award-winning barbecue sauce. I was like, they don't have barbecue sauce contests where I'm from. Anyway, I lost, but yes, I won 4,800, and it was a fun time. It was a great story.
So parting advice for all who have joined us as they either embark or continue on their life journeys.
Yeah. So if I had to choose what I'd walk away from this conversation, is one, definitely plug back into the university. Don't let that slip away. Take advantage quickly. I mean, I actually didn't really get involved to 2007, and that was in response to a crisis the university was dealing with, and I recognize an easy, for me, something I could do to help fix that situation if I just got involved, and then I never stopped from there. Two, this is the world we're in right now requires intentionality. And so be intentional in everything you do, and be bold in being right? If you know you're right, then there's no need for you to take the 2 years. I don't want anybody to know that I don't know what they're going to think. No, this is who I am. This is what I stand for. This is what I will accept. This is what I won't accept. We have no time to deal with anything else. Here's what I am. And this is what I'm doing, right? And so be intentional. We intentionally came into this company and hired the first two. And I didn't care what anybody said. No. And we're going to hire some minorities, and we're going to be more diverse in what we do. And so those would be the 2 points my two parting points. Those are the two things that I would say. You got nothing else out of this. We laughed a bit. And guess what? We're going into Costco with this bag here. So January, we'll be right there for Black History Month. We're going to Costco, and Vegan Smart is our brand right now. Sorry for the plug, shameless plug there. But I really appreciate how much the university has supported me, supported us. I'll include Claude in that. And it's really an honor and a privilege to be part of the Duke community, the Fuqua community, because it really is the best community in the world if you actually, take advantage of it. So I just say thank you for having me, and that's it. Anything else you have, I would be happy to answer. But
okay, well, Kareem, thank you so much, and thank you for showing us the way in terms of through your words tonight, in terms of what it means to be a leader of consequence, and through your actions over time. And so it's both the words and deeds that make you an incredible person, and we feel very fortunate to have you be a part of the Duke community. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
And good night, everybody.
Good night.